Coming up, another episode of The Deep Dive, exploring radical ideas. A podcast produced by Bob Rash.
Podcast that delivers a logical analysis of objective reality, grounded in rational principles. We will explore relevant facts and radical ideas based on the axiomatic principles of identity, causality, and consciousness, on reason as an absolute, on rational self-interest as a moral guide, and on the ideals of privacy, freedom, and justice.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today, we are attempting to solve a mystery. I call it the mystery of the glum globalist.
The glum globalist. I like that.
And to do it, we have to mentally transport ourselves to a very specific, very fancy location. We're going to the Hotel Bayerischer Hof in Germany.
The Hotel Bayerischer Hof, a classic venue.
Exactly. This is the site of the Munich Security Conference. Now, for those of you who don't follow the ins and outs of the diplomatic circuit, this is basically the Super Bowl of geopolitics.
It's the Davos of defense.
That's a perfect way to put it. You have heads of state, military generals, spies, think tank intellectuals. Basically everyone who, thinks they run the world is packed into this one hotel.
And usually the champagne is flowing, the back patting is vigorous, and the general vibe is, well, it's a celebration of the liberal international order.
Right. It's usually a very self-congratulatory affair.
Usually. But this year, the vibe was dead. It was somber. It was dark. In fact, Friedrich Merz, the German opposition leader, and a key figure we're going to dissect today, he pointed out the conference motto right at the start of his speech.
Yeah, that was telling.
It wasn't building bridges or peace in our time. It was under destruction.
Under destruction.
Yeah.
That is a heavy way to open a cocktail party.
It really is.
But it sets the stage perfectly for what we're analyzing today. The feeling in that room, is that the rules-based order, the stability we've kind of taken for granted since the Berlin Wall came down, it's crumbling.
So here's our mission. We are not just going to report on what happened. We are going to take a stack of speeches from three heavy hitters, Friedrich Merz from Germany, Emmanuel Macron from France, and Marco Rubio representing the U.S. administration, and we're going to grade them.
But not on a normal curve, right?
Not on a curve at all. We aren't asking who had the best applause lines. No, we are doing something much more rigorous. We are analyzing these speeches through a specific philosophical framework. We're looking at them through the lens of objectivism.
The philosophy of Ayn Rand.
Precisely. And specifically, we are benchmarking everything we hear today against the arguments made by Yaron Brook in his breakdown titled Capitalism and Benevolence.
Right.
So this isn't a Republican versus Democrat versus European centrist debate. This is a fundamental analysis. Does this politician advocate for voluntary interaction, or do they advocate for force?
Are they building a world of traitors, or are they dragging us back into a world of tribe?
That's the core question.
I love this approach because it acts like a decoder ring.
Yeah.
You realize pretty quickly that the guy from the traditional, guy from the technocratic center, and the guy from the national conservative camp might actually be speaking the same language.
And it might not be the language of liberty?
Exactly.
That's the aha moment we're aiming for. Because if you listen to Yaron Brook, he argues that the fundamental conflict in human history isn't between nations or parties. It is between two ways of dealing with people. the way of force and the way of trade.
Okay, so let's set the grounding standard first. Before we tear into the politicians, we need to understand what the ideal looks like according to our source material.
We have to define our terms.
We do. We listened to Yaron Brook's breakdown of capitalism and benevolence. Now, when I say capitalism, most people, they evoke an image of Wall Street, factories, maybe a bit of greed.
Or if they've been to a university lately, they think of exploitation.
Sure, that too.
Right. But Brook has a much more radical and, frankly, a much more precise definition. He argues that capitalism is not primarily an economic system. It's a moral and political system.
Okay.
He defines it fundamentally as the banishment of physical force from human relationships.
The banishment of force. That is a massive statement. Let's unpack that.
It is the most revolutionary idea in history. I mean, think about how humans have lived for 99% of our existence. We lived in tribes. And how did the tribe work?
The chief told you what to do.
The chief told you what to do. If you disobeyed, you were hit with a club. Then we had feudalism, kings and lords. If you didn't pay your taxes or worship the right god, you were thrown in a dungeon. It was all based on coercion.
It's all based on force.
Right. So in this view, capitalism is the first system that says no.
It draws a line.
Correct. Capitalism is the system where the government says no one is allowed to initiate physical force against another person. You cannot kill, you cannot steal, you cannot defraud, and you cannot make someone work for you against their will.
So the only role of the government then is what? To stop the bad guys?
That's it. Its only moral purpose is the protection of individual rights, to be the referee that stops the initiation of force and fraud. So, police, courts, military, and that's it. It just leaves you alone otherwise.
So the government is like a bouncer at a club. It throws out the people starting fights. It stops people from stealing wallets, but it doesn't tell you how to dance or who to buy a drink for.
It's a perfect analogy. And Brook takes it a step further. He talks about the separation of state and economics.
Yeah.
Just like we have a separation of church and state, which most people agree is a good thing, he argues for a complete wall between the government and the economy.
So no regulations, no tariffs.
No subsidies, no central bank managing interest rates, just property rights and contract enforcement. The bouncer just makes sure nobody breaks the rules of the club.
Which sounds lovely in theory, but here's where it gets really interesting for a deep dive. The title of Brook's talk was Capitalism and Benevolence. Now, I think most people associate benevolence with charity or maybe socialism. We're all in this together. How does selfish capitalism create benevolence?
This is the core insight of what Ayn Rand called the trader principle. Think about it. If force is banned, the only way I can get what I want from you, whether it's your labor, your product, or your money, is by offering you something of value in return.
I have to persuade you.
You have to trade. You can't just take it.
Right. You can't just take it.
I can't rob you, and crucially, I can't lobby the government to rob you on my behalf. So I have to treat you with respect. I have to understand your needs. And for a trade to happen, both of us have to say yes.
It has to be win-win.
It has to be win-win. If I buy a pair of shoes from you for $100, I value the shoes more than the money, and you value the money more than the shoes. We both walk away richer. We both walk away happy.
And doing that over and over again, I guess on a societal scale, that creates a certain vibe in society, a certain culture.
Exactly. It creates goodwill. It creates a society where we view strangers not as threats, but as potential partners. That is benevolence. It's the feeling that I don't have to fear my neighbor.
But Brook contrasts this with what we have today, which he calls the mixed economy.
Right. The mixed economy is where the government acts as a distributor of favors. It regulates, it taxes, it redistributes. And Brook argues this is what creates malevolence and tribalism.
Okay, why does it create malevolence? That seems like a strong word.
Because suddenly, the government has the power to pick winners and losers. If the government can tax me to subsidize you or regulate my business to help your business, then we are no longer traders.
We're rivals.
We are rivals. We are fighting for control of the gun. I have to join a tribe, a political lobby, a union, a voting bloc to protect myself or to get my share of the loot.
It becomes a zero-sum game. If you win, I lose.
Precisely. And that breeds resentment, suspicion, and eventually the kind of gloom we saw at Munich. When everyone is fighting for a piece of the pie using political power, nobody's baking new pies.
Okay, so that is our rubric, a really clear one. We are looking for the trader principle versus the tribal principle. We are looking for the banishment of force versus the reliance on force.
That's the framework.
With that in hand, let's walk into the conference hall at the Bayerischer Hof and listen to Friedrich Merz,
The leader of the CDU, the German opposition, and looking at the polls, very likely the next chancellor of Germany.
Merz is a serious guy, corporate background. He stood up and gave a speech that was basically a wake-up call. He started by diagnosing the problem, under destruction. He admits the old order is gone. He talks about Russia's violent revisionism and the brutality of the war in Ukraine.
And let's be fair, from an objectivist perspective, that is a correct identification of reality. Russia is initiating force. Russia is the aggressor. They are violating rights on a massive scale. Merz is right to identify that as a threat.
He sees the problem clear.
He sees the symptom correctly, yes.
Yeah.
But the deep dive is about his solution. How does he propose to fix it?
Well, he had this really striking line. He said, German foreign policy has had a normative surplus.
A normative surplus.
Basically, Germany has been too busy lecturing the world on morality and rules, and not busy enough actually having power. He quoted Radek Sikorski saying, "I fear German power less than German inactivity."
And that pivot is crucial. Merz is calling for a return to state power. Now, he's not just talking about defense, which Brook would agree is a legitimate function of government.
Right. A strong military to defend your rights.
Of course. If Merz just said, we need a stronger military to defend our borders and our rights, Yaron Brook would applaud him. But that is not all he said, is it?
No, not at all. He went much further. He pivoted immediately to economics. He said, quote, competition policy is security policy.
Okay, stop right there. Competition policy is security policy.
What does that actually mean?
Let's translate that. It means the government will decide who wins in the marketplace because it serves the state's security goals. It is the opposite of a free market.
So instead of the separation of state and economics, he's advocating for the marriage of state and economics.
It's the complete fusion of them. He went out to talk about China, right? He said China's been building its power with strategic patience, and that Germany needs to do the same.
Yeah, that was a key part of it.
So he looks at China, a totalitarian state that micromanages its economy for power, and his reaction isn't, we need to be more free to out-innovate them. His reaction is, we need to be more like them.
He wants the German state to have the same kind of strategic patience, which is, I mean, that's just code for industrial planning, right? For central planning.
It's a euphemism for the state picking winners and losers. It's the idea that the free market is too chaotic or too slow to fight a dictatorship, so we need, well, capitalism with Chinese characteristics almost.
Which just validates Brook's warning about the mixed economy. As threats rise, the impulse from these leaders is to grab more power, to use more force.
Exactly. Merz isn't saying, let's deregulate Germany so our economy is so dynamic China can't keep up. He's saying, let's manage Germany so we can match them. It's a fundamental error.
He also talked a lot about the European pillar. He wants a sovereign Europe with a consolidated defense industry. He used words like standardization and simplification.
Which sounds efficient, you know? Sounds like a business consultant. Let's streamline operations.
Right, let's cut the fat.
But in a political context, standardization usually means top-down mandates. It means the government telling defense companies what to build, how to buy it, and who to merge with.
So it's industrial policy for the arms industry.
It's the state picking winners. And remember Brook's point. When the state manages the economy, it creates distortions. It moves away from the free market, where innovation actually happens, toward a state-managed bureaucracy that is slow and inefficient.
So Merz sees the chaos in the world, the tribalism of Russia and China, and his response is to form a bigger, stronger tribe called Europe and arm it with state-directed industry.
That's the statist response in a nutshell. He isn't calling for an unleashing of individual creativity. He's calling for the state to take the reins.
It's just so interesting because Merz is considered a pro-business conservative in Germany. But in this speech, the business is clearly subservient to the security goals of the state.
And that is the trap of the modern right in Europe. They view the economy as a tool for the state's power, not as a playground for individual liberty. They've already accepted the mixed economy as the baseline and are just arguing about how to manage it more effectively than the left. They've lost the principle.
Okay, let's move to the next speaker, Emmanuel Macron, president of France. Now, if Merz is the corporate manager wanting a merger, Macron is, I don't know, the philosopher king wanting to build a new empire.
He certainly has that air about him.
His speech was all about Europe as a geopolitical power.
Macron is always very explicit. He said Europe has been an economic project, a market, but now it must become a power. And he used a phrase that should send shivers down the spine of any free trader.
Which was?
European preference.
European preference. That sounds nice and patriotic on the surface, but what does it actually mean in practice?
It means protectionism. It means discrimination. It means buy European even if it's more expensive or lower quality than what you can get from the US or Korea or Japan. He explicitly called for sovereign supply chains and de-risking.
So going back to Yaron Brook's framework, Brook defines capitalism as free trade. The trader principle is about finding the best value, regardless of where it comes from.
Right. If I buy a battery from China because it's the best battery at the best price, I am practicing the trader principle. I'm looking for value. Macron is basically saying, no, the tribe matters more than the value.
He views trade as a weakness.
He views trade not as a benevolent win-win interaction, but as a vulnerability. He thinks if we buy batteries from China or software from America, we are weak.
So he wants to use government-forced tariffs, subsidies, regulations to close off Europe. He's turning trade into a weapon.
Exactly. He is building a fortress. And inside that fortress, he wants to control more than just the supply chains. He wants to control the flow of information. This was the part of his speech that really stood out to me.
You're talking about the DSA.
The Digital Services Act, yeah. He launched a full-throated defense of it.
He was beaming about it. And this is where the conflict with objectivism becomes most acute, isn't it? The DSA is a massive regulatory framework for the internet and social media.
And Macron said, quote, free speech does not mean no regulation.
Which sounds like a contradiction in terms.
Freedom does not mean freedom.
Right.
He went on to conflate hatred speech, which is a vague, subjective term, with physical violence. He argued that algorithms need to be controlled to protect democracy.
Okay, let's apply the objectivist lens here. Brook talks about force. He says the government should stop force and fraud. Is hate speech force?
Well, it's mean, it's ugly, it can be psychologically damaging, but does it break my leg? No.
According to objectivism, absolutely not. Unless speech is a direct incitement to immediate physical violence like pointing a gun and saying shoot him, it is not force. Words are not bullets. Offensive ideas are not crimes.
But Macron is arguing they are, or that they lead directly to crimes. He's arguing that the state has a right, even a duty, to police the digital space, to protect citizens from bad ideas.
That feels incredibly paternalistic. It's like he views the citizens as children who can't be trusted to hear the wrong thing.
It's the antithesis of individualism. An individualist relies on their own mind, on their own reason to judge truth and falsehood. A collectivist looks to the state to filter reality for them. Macron is advocating for state control of the mind under the guise of safety.
He's basically saying,
you are too stupid to resist a Russian bot or a racist tweet, so I, the benevolent president, will protect your eyes and ears.
And he linked this directly to sovereignty. He basically said, we can't let American or Chinese algorithms control our teenagers.
Right, so his solution is to have European bureaucrats control the teenagers. It's a battle for control, not a battle for liberty. He's not saying parents should control their kids' phones. He's saying Brussels should control the algorithms.
It's all about centralizing power.
Always. And he talked about financing all this too. He mentioned common borrowing, basically the EU taking on debt together for defense.
Which is another expansion of the mixed economy.
Of course. When you have common debt, you are forcing taxpayers in Germany to pay for projects in France or Italy. It disconnects the payer from the beneficiary. Brook argues this is a recipe for resentment.
It destroys benevolence.
It destroys benevolence because now the Germans are looking at the Italians asking, what are you doing with my money? It turns nations into squabbling tribes fighting over the public purse.
So with Macron, we have a technocratic collectivist. He wants a super state that manages trade, manages industry, and now manages speech.
A complete package.
Yeah, let's cross the Atlantic. We heard from Marco Rubio. And this was interesting because he was there representing the incoming Trump administration. He's the Secretary of State in this scenario.
Right.
And he came out swinging against what he called the end of history delusion.
This was a very different flavor of statism.
No.
Rubio's speech wasn't technocratic. It was rooted in history, tradition, and religion.
He critiqued the whole idea that global trade and liberal democracy would just naturally take over the world after the Cold War. He had this line, "The ties formed by trade and by commerce alone would now replace nationhood." He said that was a foolish idea.
Okay, stop and think about that through the lens of Yaron Brook. Brook and Ayn Rand argue that trade is the unifying force, that commerce is the rational way for people to interact. Rubio is explicitly rejecting that.
He's saying something else is more important.
He's saying nationhood, which is a form of tribal identity, is superior to, or at least more fundamental than commerce.
He went deep into his definition of the West, and he didn't talk about the Enlightenment or the Age of Reason or the scientific method as the root. He talked about Christian faith, ancestors, and, well, blood and soil imagery.
He listed the Scots-Irish, the Spanish. It was very specific. And this is a crucial distinction. Ayn Rand and objectivism are staunch defenders of Western civilization. But they defend it because it is the civilization of reason, of individual rights, of the secular Enlightenment.
Whereas Rubio is defending it based on
tradition, religion, and lineage. He actually mentioned godless communist revolutions. The implication being that the problem with communism was that it was godless.
Right. Whereas an objectivist would say the problem with communism is that it denies the individual's right to exist for their own sake.
Exactly. It's the lack of rights, not the lack of God. Ayn Rand was an atheist, remember? She argued that you don't need God to have rights, you need reason. Rubio is suggesting that without God and tradition, we are lost. He's substituting one form of collectivism, religion, and nation for another, like communism or globalism.
And then he pivoted to economics, and man, he sounded a lot like the European leftists of the 90s. He said free trade stripped our nations of their wealth.
That is the zero-sum fallacy in action. It's pure mercantilism. Rubio views trade deficits as losing. He thinks if China makes our t-shirts and we buy them, we have lost wealth.
But trade is value for value. If I buy a shirt for $10, it's because I value the shirt more than the $10. I haven't lost, I've gained. The seller gained, we both won.
Exactly. But Rubio wants to stop that trade, to pursue reindustrialization. He wants the government to bring the factories back.
So he wants the government to interfere in the market. He's saying the same thing as the others.
Yes. Just like Macron, he supports industrial policy. He supports tariffs. He wants the state to direct the economy. He just wants to do it for national reasons, to help the working class and restore the nation, rather than for European sovereignty.
It's the horseshoe theory, isn't it? You go far enough, right? And you end up agreeing with the statist left on economic control.
Exactly. Rubio calls for supply chain sovereignty. That means the government telling you who you can buy from. It means higher prices for consumers to prop up domestic industries that might be less efficient. It is the state interfering in voluntary exchange.
He also linked this to immigration. He views it as a threat to cohesion and culture.
Which is perfectly consistent with his tribal view. If the nation is defined by blood and soil and Christian faith, then immigrants are, by definition, a threat to that identity.
So how does that compare to Brook's view?
Well, Brook takes a different view. He argues that in a pure capitalist system, without a welfare state, immigration is generally benevolent. People come to work and trade. They are value creators.
But Brook does acknowledge the mixed economy problem regarding immigration, right?
He does. He says that when you have a welfare state, immigrants can become a drain on the system, or they can form a voting bloc that threatens your rights through the political process. But see the difference. Rubio doesn't blame the welfare state. He blames the migration itself.
He wants to close the border to protect the culture, rather than dismantling the welfare state to restore freedom.
Precisely. He's treating the symptom, not the disease. And the disease is the mixed economy itself.
So let's zoom out. We have reviewed the three speeches. We have Merz, the bureaucratic statist, Macron, the technocratic statist, and Rubio, the traditionalist statist. Let's try to bring this all into a synthesis. What is the common thread here?
The common thread is the absence of the individual.
The absence of the individual. That really strikes a chord. Explain what you mean by that.
In all three speeches, the primary unit of concern, the thing they want to save and strengthen, is the collective. For Merz, it's the state or democracy that needs power to fight China. For Macron, it's Europe as a geopolitical bloc that needs to be sovereign. For Rubio, it's the nation defined by heritage and faith.
And where is the guy who just wants to open a bakery or code an app or speak his mind? Where is the actual human being in all of this?
He is viewed as a cell in this larger organism. His job is to sacrifice. He has to pay higher prices for European preference. He has to accept censorship for the sake of democracy. He has to forego cheaper goods for national supply chains. The individual is the fuel for the state's engine.
And none of them, not one, mentioned the separation of state and economics.
None. In fact, they all explicitly called for the opposite. They all said, in their own ways, that the era of markets deciding things is over, and the era of great power politics, which means state control is back.
This brings us back to the mystery we started with, the glum globalist. The mood at Munich was gloomy, under destruction. Yaron Brook argues that benevolence, that feeling of goodwill and optimism, comes from freedom. It comes from the trader principle.
Right. When you are a trader, you look out at the world and see potential partners. You see opportunities. It's an optimistic worldview. I can build something. I can sell it to you. We both get richer.
Yeah.
It makes you want to engage with the world.
But when you are a warrior or a tribalist,
You look out at the world and see threats. You see China stealing your jobs. You see Russia stealing land. You see immigrants stealing your culture. You see disinformation stealing your democracy. The world becomes a scary, hostile place where you have to carry a big stick and a big government to survive.
and that creates the malevolence Brook talks about.
It's the source of it, that constant fear and resentment. The gloom at Munich comes from the fact that everyone is ramping up force power politics, tariffs, regulations. They're all becoming warriors.
It's ironic, isn't it? They are all reacting to real threats. Russia really is aggressive. China really is a totalitarian competitor. But their reaction is to adopt the methods of the enemy.
That is the tragedy of it all. To fight China, Merz wants to become more like China's state-directed economy. To fight Russian disinformation, Macron wants to adopt Russian-style control of information. To fight global instability, Rubio wants to retreat into the kind of nationalism that often sparked wars in the past.
They're abandoning the very thing that made the West successful.
They're abandoning freedom.
The secret sauce of the West wasn't that we had better bureaucrats or stronger borders or more tariffs. It was that we unleashed the human mind.
Precisely. We banished force from human relationships to a degree never before seen in history. We let people think, invent, and trade. That created the wealth and the military power that saved the world multiple times. By turning our backs on that, by saying freedom is too dangerous now, we need control, we are cutting off the source of our own strength.
Rubio did mention the Constitutional Republic, though. He paid lip service to it.
He did. And words matter. But actions and policies matter more. You cannot have a constitutional republic which is designed to limit government while advocating for a government that manages supply chains, sets tariffs, and restricts the movement of goods and people based on a vague national interest.
The two things are in conflict.
They're in direct conflict. A true constitutional republic protects individual rights. It doesn't pick economic winners and losers.
So we went to Munich looking for the heirs of the Enlightenment. We were hoping to find someone, anyone, standing up for reason, individualism, and capitalism.
And instead, we found three men arguing over who should hold the leash, but all agreeing that the people need to be leashed.
It's a sobering realization. The gloom at the conference wasn't just about Ukraine or Gaza. It was a deeper gloom, maybe a subconscious realization that they have run out of ideas.
Or that they have forgotten the only idea that actually works.
So what does this mean for us, the listeners? We're watching these leaders shape our future. They are raising defense budgets. They're passing the Digital Services Act. They are putting up tariffs. What's the takeaway?
It means we are heading into a rougher, less benevolent world. A world where you will be asked more and more to sacrifice for the team, whether that team is Europe, Germany, or America. You'll be treated less as an independent trader and more as a soldier in an economic and cultural war.
That is a stark warning, but I think that's why we do these deep dives, to see clearly what is coming down the pipe.
And to know that there is an alternative. The philosophy of objectivism, of capitalism, as Yaron Brook describes it, still exists. The idea of a world based on trade and benevolence is still there, even if the guys on the stage in Munich have forgotten it.
Here is a final thought I want to leave you with. We've talked a lot about the trader versus the soldier or the tribalist. It's a useful framework, and I think it poses a question not just for politicians, but for all of us. If benevolence is the product of society free from force, and all our leaders are calling for the weaponization of trade, culture, and industry, are we heading toward a future where the West survives physically, but loses the very soul, the very individualism that made it worth saving in the first place?
That's the billion-dollar question. And maybe a more personal way to ask it is this. When you listen to your own leaders, do they ask you to be a trader, creating value, or do they ask you to be a soldier in a cultural or economic war?
That's the litmus test.
It is. If they're selling fear and asking for power, they're on the side of the under-destruction motto. If they are selling freedom and asking you to be responsible for yourself, that's the path back to benevolence.
We're going to wrap it up there. This has been a heavy one, but an important one. We've linked the full speeches and Yaron Brook's excellent breakdown in the show notes. I highly recommend you listen to the source material yourself.
Definitely. Hearing Brook explain the benevolence that comes from freedom is really inspiring, especially in contrast to the heavy speeches from Munich.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.
Stay rational.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Deep Dive, exploring radical ideas, grounded in reality, driven by reason, built on self-esteem, rational self-interest, and laissez-faire capitalism, produced by Bob Rash.